I was watching HLTV Confirmed and they were talking about Brolan. And then I was watching Talking Counter and they were talking about how great Brolan did. And then I was watching the Hot Take Point Made with Thorin, where he was talking about this is just another example of why the IGLing doesn't matter that much. I don't know what he was exactly saying, but everyone seems to be using this as either an example of people being wrong and maybe Brolan's going to be a great IGL, or the idea that you don't need the best IGL of all time is what it felt like the point was. People are overrating this victory. Look, I don't want to be negative. I try to make these videos more positive when possible, but everyone's talking about Mouz like, oh, haters proven wrong. We have a laundry list. I could probably find, if I really look, 10 examples of this happening, but I'll give you a few off the top of my head. Fnatic, when they had their 8-event run, where they won 8 events in a row, legendary run, they replaced Pronax with a non-IGL, and they realized shortly after that 8-event run, or maybe not that shortly after, they realized eventually that working without an IGL didn't actually work. In fact, they just kind of had a hangover where they had the IGL system, they had a lot of things working, and their new IGL had a new style, and teams weren't ready for that. Okay, let's skip all the way forward. Nico won an event with Stewie, who was playing objectively, if you look at the stats, as bad as Hooksy or worse. It wasn't a better player. It wasn't even an upgrade, which is usually what happens. When an IGL gets cut or leaves and you replace him with a star player and someone else takes over the IGLing role, usually you just overwhelm with firepower. Well, with the Nico one, they didn't even overwhelm with firepower. It was just a different calling style. And they were calling, by the way, the same strats. Like, just to be clear, I was watching that game. I knew they were running a half based around 1 or 2 strats on Anubis, and a couple of times on other maps they did the same thing because I had just stolen that strat from them for a team I was coaching. So I knew the strat, and then they ran it, and then they faked it, and then they ran it. It was like they had like a Hooksy playbook, and it was just Nico calling, teams weren't ready for it. Then you had Twists. Twists, first event IGLing, beats Navi twice in the same event. Almost beats FaZe. I think they took them into OT on map 3, like very close. And people are heavily questioning if Twist is a great IGL, but he looked amazing in that one. He looked amazing in that one. We can even go back, because those are the 2 most obvious examples from very recently, but we can even go back to Nico and Kerrigan. Before he got cut, Kerrigan stopped calling and Nico started calling mid-event when they were down 0-2, I believe, at a major. They had a really bad showing in an event, and I believe mid-event, Nico started calling and they ended up having a decent run. Now, Nico is Nico, to be fair, but this isn't like this crazy new thing where you have to be an amazing IGL to have a good place. Look, it's especially impressive because Mouz have really struggled in playoffs up until this point. So maybe you're seeing that there could be a shift. And if there is a shift, even if Brolan isn't as good of an IGL, if it was really just that Shuhei was choking in big moments in playoffs, then you could have them actually improve. And maybe Brolan is going to be a good IGL. I'm not trying to say that he's not going to be a good IGL. In fact, I have high hopes for Brolan, especially because Spinks, the firepower Spinks brings to this team is incredible. But keep in mind the firepower that Spinks brings to this team is incredible. Okay, it's like in several of these games, especially if you actually watch the Inferno game of Mouz versus Pain. A lot of the rounds that Mouz were winning were rounds where Pain was actually stacked on the right bomb site. They had the right read. And then just Spinks would double kill, or Brolan would double entry or something, and they would just pull off some insane heroics. And then the reason I'm looking at this game, it's not to make Brolan look bad. It's the reason I wanted to look at this one is because they kind of remind me a little bit of Gamer Legion, where it feels like Gamer Legion intentionally run some very aggressive plays, because then you don't have to mid-round as much when you have a team that's not quite with Gamer Legion. It's like a team that's not quite as experienced with each other, right? They need a little bit of work to put it together. And if you want to kind of make it work in the short term and try and get deep in an event to get your VRS rating, you might try and play a little bit more aggressive, catch your opponents off guard, and then sometimes rounds kind of play themselves out when you get an early entry where you turn it into a 3v3. Your players can make smart decisions on their own. It's not necessarily about all your protocols and all these instant reactions and all this type of thing that can get very strategic. You know, you can think about it like Dust 2. If you want to be strategic on Dust 2, you take long and then you can like go back, you could even go B, you can take short, you can turn it into a strategic round, or you just go long and then end up on A site. And it's not quite, you know, you can kind of minimize the strategic aspect. I'm not saying that necessarily Mouz did that. What I mean to use as an example there is that it feels like Mouz had, for the majority of this event, kind of one gear. And this was an example of a game where the fast plays aren't going well, right? They're trying to go fast pace, and this round ends late, right? It ends with 30 seconds left. But at the same time, the rounds are being decided very consistently, very early on in the round. And it's just not, when it's not working, it's just not working. It didn't feel like there was necessarily a lot of really great kind of mid-game adjustments. And again, that's not a slight against brolan. It's not that he couldn't come up with this. It's not that it's not possible. It's just that it takes some time to necessarily get used to. It might take some time, some getting used to even just integrating a player into that system. Maybe Spinks had a lot of ideas and they had trouble dealing with that. Sometimes even just integrating Spinks might have some comfort plays that he likes to make. And then as an IGL, what might happen is that in a game like this, and Nico's talked about this recently, I believe, your player is going to call, I want to make this play, and then the IGL has to call around that to make the round make sense. And so even if brolan is used to the plays that his teammates are making and ways that he can call around those plays, he might not be used to plays that Spinks wants to make and how to call around those plays, right? Because even as an IGLs also have comfort plays, comfort calls, things like that. They have ways like that they know how to play, and if you kind of take them out of that, it can be tough. Here we have, yet again, this isn't the fastest round, but I mean, it's 120, and we've got brolan trying to get in a connector. Now they're already in a 3v5. Testis just naded out the top mid smoke and just had a straight up duel, got himself a kill to turn it into the 5v4. You had Jimmy and Spinks trying to double up ramp. I think they were trying to play off of the mid pressure and just double walk out ramp to actually just take the duel on the A player. Didn't end up working. This is kind of just how the half goes. They don't really slow down too much. I mean, the rounds, again, it's going to go late, but the round is more or less decided once you're already in a 5v3 and you give up on taking mid control, right? Didn't they give up on taking mid control and then they went back and took it later? And even if you win this, like, let's say Mouz win this round, that doesn't mean that this, like, strategically worked, right? They ended up in a 5v3 off the opening of the round, and it's a 5-1 scoreline. Now what are they going to go for? They're going to go for a 4 mid play, brolan with the Mac 10, going to go fast towards connector. And it's not that these are bad plays necessarily, it's just that it feels like they were going for fast aggressive play after fast aggressive play. And quite simply, Falcons had their number. Maybe the reality is, and I'll give them a break on this one, because maybe the reality is that Falcons are just better on this map. Maybe Mouz just don't have like perfect protocols on this map. They couldn't build out their map pool fast enough with brolan calling, something like that. It's always possible. And so he just knew if we slow it down, it's not going to work. But it did kind of feel like that on several maps where it just felt like it's not working for Mouz and they're not really changing the pace that much. It's like they're trying to like run into a brick wall and continue doing the same thing. That could be me misreading it, absolutely, but that's just the way I kind of felt about it. And it really felt like when they didn't start out with a good game plan, because I think to their credit, they came up with some really good game plans, I think, and opened up a lot of games with an advantage, with really good ideas, especially in the final here, of how to deal with Nico on Ancient, to how to deal with Nico on Nuke, how to deal with Falcons. I think they did a really good job of that in general throughout this event. But when those weren't working, I think they had troubles, and even sometimes those might not have been working, but they just, I mean, Spinks is an incredible player. Again, huge upgrade, massive firepower on this roster. They don't necessarily need to be the most tactical team of all time. They can do aggressive plays. They can be a really scary team in that way. Just to me, the problem I'm having is only about the hype around brolan, and everyone's going like, I think on Talking Counter, they're like, someone said they need to apologize. I know they're not like going, all of these people have been talking about like, well, we'll see how it goes for another couple events. It just feels like one event, I'm not ready to rate brolan as that impressive of an IGL off of one event. I feel like, to me, one event is more or less meaningless. Genuinely, it's more or less meaningless this early on. In 2-3 events time, if they're still doing well, in two months time, if they're still doing well, if they do well, I think they're going to Pro League soon. If they do well at Pro League, I'm ready to say it. I'm ready to say I'm not even going to say I was wrong, okay? I didn't even talk shit about brolan. And now everyone that's watching this is going to be like, you're just a brolan hater. I want brolan to do well. Mouz is, FaZe is my favorite team probably, and then after that it's Mouz. I want Mouz to do well. It's just that I just see the narratives about this, and it's like, didn't we just in the last 12 months, we've had 2 IGL changes that just immediately popped off, and then nobody thinks that Nico is going to be this like insane IGL, and most people seem to be questioning Twist's IGLing, but off the first event, they would have said it's amazing. Anyways, I just had to get that out there. I had to get that off my chest. I just had to get it off my chest. I'll make a video on Phase Astralis tomorrow.